If you've been here before, you know I'm not a cool toned eyeshadow girl, necessarily. I mean, I do enjoy wearing cool tones here and there. It's not my preferred undertone, if you will, but I do have a handful of palettes in my collection that I really love when I do want a cool toned look, or I want to mix cool tones into my look. So these are my top favorite cool tone palettes in my collection. Hello and welcome if you are new here. My name is Rachel, and if you're not new here, thank you so much for coming back. All of the palettes that are still available, I will link down below in the description box. Not all of them are, and this isn't a way for me to get you to buy a palette. Maybe you want to shop your stash. Maybe you have one of these palettes in your collection that you want to pull out. This is just a fun way for me to talk about eyeshadow. Like any excuse I can get to do that, I will. So that's what we're gonna do today. I did see my friend K Bella Beauty, or Kelly is her real name, do a video like this, and it inspired me to do it as well. She also did a warm tone version, and I think I probably will do that as well. Let me know if you're interested in hearing like my favorite warm tone palettes. I will link Kelly's video down below. Now, some of these palettes aren't entirely cool toned. Some of them are mostly cool toned with a couple of pops of maybe warms or neutrals in there. This is just kind of what I consider to be cool toned, or like primarily cool toned. So we're gonna start off with some quote honorable mention, two palettes that I'm still currently testing. I haven't even ranked them yet. They're still in the testing phase for me, but I definitely wanted to mention them because I have used both of these brands before. Their quality is good, and the experience I've had so far with these palettes has been good, and they're new palettes, and I wanna talk about them. So the first one is not this one. So the first one is the Adept and Amy Loves collaboration. This is such a glam dream. Like if you are someone who loves glam packaging and very sparkly, shiny, shifty, gorgeous shimmers, this would be a great one for you. Absolutely gorgeous. Like Adept shimmers are some of the most beautiful and impactful shimmers in my collection. They are ultra creamy to the touch. They just glide over the eye so beautifully, and this is no exception. The shade Lavender is a multi-chrome, and it is like a blue, also some green, also some purple. It is so stunning. The shade Indie is a holochrome shade. I mean, really, really gorgeous. This is heavily shimmer because Adept is known for their shimmer shadows. A lot of their palettes are very shimmer heavy, so if you like shimmer heavy palettes, you might enjoy the brand. I've really enjoyed the looks I've created with this. I maybe have to use it maybe once or twice more just to get my final thoughts, but I mean, I can confidently say this is a good quality palette, and if you enjoy this color story, I mean, it's gorgeous. The second honorable mention is a palette I've only used once, but it is the Cosmic Beauty Cool Trills palette. This is, I mean, it's a completely cool tone palette. That's how it's marketed. Although I will say I do think some of these up here are considered more like neutral leaning. I don't know that they're all cool, but if you are someone that likes blues, we've got a whole bunch of blues on the bottom, and we have a whole bunch of like mauve-y leaning shades up top. I do like a cool tone palette that's not all gray, black, and white. I do feel that there is a little bit of like color infused in here, but you of course can get a neutral look. There is also a multi-chrome in here, some beautiful shimmers, and I really love the Cosmic Brushes matte and shimmer formula. I think they do a really good job with both formulas. They're really affordable, and they are a UK-based indie brand, so this could be something you could look into if that is more convenient for you to buy from a UK-based indie brand. But yeah, I mean, I'm in the US, and it didn't take that long to get to me considering how far away it had to come, but yeah, so far so good. I really enjoy the brand, and I'm gonna enjoy playing with this one. All right, I have 11 palettes remaining in my collection that I have used these quite a bit. I do have final thoughts on them. So let's start off with the palette I have on my eyes, but I mean, I didn't create necessarily a cool toned look today. I feel like this is kind of neutral leaning. Listen, if there's greens in a palette, I'm really gravitating toward the greens, but I love how this came out. And this is the Blend Bunny Longing palette. Blend Bunny has, am I gonna say my favorite? I would say top 3 favorite matte formulas. Like, just so beautiful matte formula, super easy to use, super easy to blend, but pigmented. I really always enjoy their quality. I love the packaging on this. I like the size of this one. It's not quite their smallest size palette, but it is smaller for the brand. I really love this beautiful kind of lace detail, with a little bit of sparkle in there. And then on the inside, we have this beautiful, definitely heavily cool toned color story. Maggie, the owner of Blend Money, she did state that she wanted to create a cool toned palette that was kind of neutral, but with some interest as well. And that's exactly what I would call this. These two columns over here, although I used this column and I used the multichrome When It Rains, beautiful. Definitely green leaning. This is more of a cool tone neutral situation. We've got greens, we've got blues, we've got purples. More of that like dusty, muted, colorful tones that could kind of creep over into neutral. So I do feel that the shimmers in this are the best shimmers they've done. They're very smooth, but still dimensional, still got that little sparkle to them without being chunky. Like I said, the multichrome When It Rains is so beautiful. This duochrome Love Letters, so beautiful. Remember, which is a pure like chromy silver, so stunningly beautiful. So yeah, I mean, the quality of Blend Money is so good. It's nothing to really, there's nothing really I can say. But if you like cool toned, like blues, purples, but more like muted, not as like bright pops like the Cosmic Brushes one, this would be a really good one for you. And even though I'm not a huge cool tone lover, I have been enjoying this. This is a little bit of a controversial one, but listen, I love this palette. And it is half cool toned, half neutral, and some warm pops, but this is the Sigma Cool Neutrals. I mean, I couldn't not include it. It's called Cool Neutrals, you know what I mean? Packaging, my favorite packaging that they've ever done. It is inspired by the Brazilian agate stone, and you can definitely see that by the cover. The brush that comes in the palette also has that agate print on it. And then on the inside, we have this gorgeous color story. Again, I would say this half of the palette is pretty cool toned. This half of the palette is more warm to neutrals, if you will. I really love the Sigma formula. If you saw my palette ranking, all the palettes that I've ranked this year so far, this came in pretty high up in the countdown because I just love the Sigma formula. It is super easy to use. You can make it more like bam in your face, but it can also lean a little bit more everyday, soft and pretty, just super easy to use. I will say, I think that the mattes in this are a little more pigmented than the usual Sigma quality. And the shimmers in here, there's a couple of different formulas, some that are just like really pretty standard shimmers, and some that are a little bit more bright, a little bit more shiny. I love the color story. You can pull it very neutral. You can add a little bit of color into your look with this as well. But yeah, I just really love Sigma's eyeshadow formula. It's just like a very dependable formula. I should have also said this. I really tried to narrow it down to one palette per brand because some of the brands have several different palettes I could choose, like multiple palettes, but I really tried to narrow it down to one palette per brand, okay? It was hard. It was hard, but I think I did it. So, Unearthly Cosmetics is one of my favorite brands, and my favorite cool tone palette that they have is the Dreamer palette. This, I mean, I love the palettes they have in this format, where it's more like a rectangle. They always kill it with the packaging. I love this girl with her 3 eyes. I don't know, she's just so beautiful and like, she sees it all clearly. And on the inside, we have a beautiful cool tone color story. This is something that I'm drawn to. When there are berry tones mixed into a cool tone palette, I'm sold. Like, I'm sold. We do have this quad down here that is very gray, navy, typical cool toned type of color story, which I have created a look with this quad and I really enjoyed it. But then again, we have pinks, berries, purples. The shimmer formula for Unearthly, like these newer palettes, is top 3 favorite. So beautiful, shiny, pretty, smooth, beautiful. How many times am I going to say beautiful? Every time I say beautiful, take a drink of water. We're staying hydrated over here. I always love me a brown because I am a neutral girl. I love the different depths of matte in here. I love the different shimmer options. There is one special shimmer in here called Fantasy. Yeah, this is just an interesting cool tone color story that incorporates berries. One of the only mainstream palettes that I really get excited about in my collection still to this day, and I need to use this palette because I haven't used it in so long, is the Huda Beauty Rose Quartz palette. Do you remember when this came out? Everybody was raving about it, but for good reason. I think this is such a gorgeous palette, and not even just for being a mainstream palette. I mean, just in general. Packaging look. I mean, come on. So pretty. On the inside, we have definitely a cool tone color story, but again, it's not grays, blacks, and whites. It's more pinky, taupey leaning. The mattes in this are good. They're very buttery, not overly pigmented, very easy to work with, more just like a silky smooth formula, which I really enjoy because it's easy to use. The shimmers in this though, I'm trying not to like swatch too much because you're obviously seeing swatches, but I will say I've had this palette for quite a while. I got it when it came out. These shimmers feel a little drier than they did when I first bought the palette. Wow, like look at that. That is beautiful. I definitely have to pull this one out and use it again. Let me know if you have this palette. Let me know if you still use it, if you bought it a long time ago, and how it's held up over time. I remember using this palette and just being blown away by the looks that I could create. I bought this a while ago, so it was kind of right when I was getting into eyeshadows and discovering indie brands. And I remember trying this and being like, wow, this is a really good palette for Sephora. So yeah, I mean, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And it is definitely cool toned, but more pink leaning. A classic kind of typical taupey kind of cool tones color story that I really enjoy is the That's Taupe palette from ColourPop. And I actually compare this one to the Natasha Denona Glam palette, which, spoiler alert, is not in this video because I actually like this palette more than the Natasha Denona. Crazy, right? But I think this is a good condensed version of that palette, and I like the shimmers in this more. So I really enjoy the ColourPop formula mattes of the small circle pans. I think they're really good. They're not overly hard pressed in the pan. They're not like the best mattes in the whole world, but I think they're really good. We have different depths in our mattes. We have a really deep matte. We have a couple of lighter options. We have a mid-tone option, which I love. And all of the shimmers here are slightly different. And these shimmers are really pretty standard metallics, but they still have shine to them. They still have a little bit of oomph to them. I feel like the Natasha Denona Glam palette, the shimmers are just kind of lackluster. I mean, I don't think they're bad. They're just not my favorite. But these ones I prefer. I love how condensed this is. And I really like it. Are you going to get a big variety of looks with this palette? No, but it's a 9-pan. So like, I'm not expecting miracles. But if I want just a really pretty taupe look, I've reached for this one a lot. This palette is one of the most unique palettes in my collection. Every time I open it, I look at it and I still like gasp. I think it's just so stunning. And that is the Christmas Eve palette from Oden's Eye. This is my favorite cool tone color story from the brand, although they do have another one, the Gems, something Gems. That was the other one I was gonna choose. I ended up going with this one. I mean, yeah, I love it. I did an Oden's Eye ranking quite a while ago, and this was my #1 palette. Would it still be my #1 palette? I don't know. Maybe I'll have to do an updated ranking. Now, I think this is a little misleading because of the packaging. I feel that it makes it seem like it's a blue palette, but there are really only 1, 2, 3, 4 blues. This one maybe is considered a blue, but it is a multi-chrome. So I think there are really only 4 like true blue shades in here. We do have greens. We do have a couple of warm pops in here, which I appreciate. I do like to incorporate warm into my looks a lot. We have some silvers, we have a taupe. So I do feel that it's not all blue. I mean, there are quite a lot of blues in here, but this is a cool tone color story that is just so unique to my collection. This multi-chrome, what I say, gorgeous, is gorgeous. I can't even probably show you all of the shifts in here. It's just gorgeous. They named the shade correctly. This came out 2022 holiday, I believe. I bought both palettes. I wasn't gonna buy this one. I was just gonna buy the other one, the Merry Christmas palette. And then I remember I watched Heather Austin's video specifically using this, and I was sold on it. So I bought both, and then they discontinued them. And so many people were so upset that they didn't grab it, and they brought it back last year. So I'm glad that they did. I hope that if you were interested in this, you were able to get your hands on it. I don't think it's coming back, but oh man, do I cherish this one. It's definitely one of my favorite Oden's Eye palettes. Definitely one of the more unique palettes in my collection. Objectively, this palette isn't in my preferences, I guess, because it is pretty heavily like gray leaning. but every time I've created looks with this palette, I've been honestly blown away, not to toot my own horn or anything, but it's due to the quality, I really think. And that is the Crazy in Love palette, collaborating between Glamlite and Chucky. I always love their packaging and theming. I think Glamlite does a great job with that. And then on the inside, this is what the palette looks like. This was their Valentine's Day collection for 2023. I thought it was a really fun spin on a Valentine's Day collection. These mattes are very pigmented. Like, what you see is what you get. I think maybe I would have enjoyed maybe 1 or 2 lighter mattes just because I like to have a transition shade. Can I reach into any of these other palettes that I've talked about to get one? Yes, I can. Yes, I can. And also the shimmers, most of them are quite deep, which I don't always love. I like to just have variety and depth in my mattes and shimmers. But the shimmer formula for Glamlite, when they do it right, is so beautiful. And these are just like very sparkly, very smooth, very shiny. No like duochromes or multichromes, but just really pretty shimmers. I mean, this is like a deep, dark, vampy cool tone color story. It's kind of similar to another palette that I'm gonna mention in a little bit, but this one is definitely darker. So if you are someone that likes mid-tone to deep shades, and that's really what you're going to use mostly, this would be a great one. And even though it is like a Valentine's Day color story, I still think it would go good for like fall and winter because it has that depth and vampiness to it. Really good palette. Another palette that has those berry tones, and again, if you watched my ranking every palette I've used this year so far, this came in very, very, very high at the top. I will link that video down below if you missed it. But this is the Reckless Romance palette from Beauty Bay. It is that very heavily gray toned palette, but infusing many berries in here. I love this palette. I just really had reached for it so much more than I thought I was going to. I kept it in my testing drawer for a really long time. Even though I had really gotten my final thoughts on it, I still wanted to keep using it over and over again when I wanted to create more dramatic looks. I was still able to create a very neutral look with these 2 shades here, but the Beauty Bay formula is good. The mattes are just really good, dependable, no frills. Like, they're not overly pigmented, but they're just good, easy to work with mattes. The shimmers here, again, nothing like crazy spectacular, but just a really pretty standard shimmer formula. It is a little bit more on the wet feeling, so it's not dry or flaky, but I really enjoy a standard shimmer. I don't know, I just do. And we've got different depths in both the mattes and the metallics. I really enjoy creating with this palette. It is unfortunately not available anymore. I really wish that they would bring it back, but I guess the thing with Beauty Bay is that they come out with a palette. Once it sells out, that's kind of it. This is my first palette from the brand. I did pick up their newest palette that is like greens and peaches, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, I mean, I've really been reaching for this one a lot. It's definitely one of my favorite palettes that has a cool tone color story in my collection. One of my favorite brands is Nomad Cosmetics. They are a destination-based indie brand, and they create collections based on different destinations around the world, and their Halloween release last year was the Ghost Town USA palette. This is going to be restocked this fall, which is really exciting. I love the lenticular cover where we've got the ghost town. Like, we have the town before it's haunted, as it is, like this, and then you go like this. Who's that guy? He's scary. I love a spooky theme. Okay, I love a spooky theme. I can't help it. And then on the inside, we have this, I would say, again, more dusty, muted, cool toned, colorful shades, although we do have these 2 columns here that definitely lean more neutral. And I would say not even that cool tone. They're more neutral, even maybe a little warm. But definitely this half of the palette, or this 2/3 of the palette, I would call cool toned. Greens, blues, but more of that muted green and blue, not ultra bright, not ultra like bam in your face. I think the quality of this is very good. It's the really good Nomad quality where the mattes are pigmented, the shimmers are sparkly and smooth, nothing shifty, nothing like too crazy in terms of multi-chromes, but stunningly beautiful. And I just love a spooky theme. Like this one and the Haunted Europe are my favorite themed palettes from them. So if you are interested in this, it is coming back this fall for a limited time, I think. I think Maybe they said they're going to try to keep it for a year. I don't know, but it obviously depends on how it sells, but stunningly beautiful. And I know a lot of you love this palette. Whenever I've mentioned it, you've said it's like your favorite Nomad palette. I can see why. Another palette that kind of gives me the same vibes as the Crazy in Love by Glamlite is the Wicked Widow Beauty The Crow palette. It is that gray, black, and red toned palette, although I will say I think that this is definitely different, and I will kind of point out why. I do have a broken shade here, so I need to be careful. I think that this is for somebody that wants special shimmers, because the shimmers in this are out of this world. And I've always said that about Wicked Widow Beauty. I think the shimmer formula is the standout for the brand. A lot of these are very sparkly, even glitter looking on the eyes. They're not pressed glitters, but they've got that very piecey, very shiny, shimmery look to them. They're not gonna be subtle. When you wear one of these shimmers on the eye, they are the focal point. And I also think that the reds in this are brighter reds. They're not as deep dark as the Chucky. So if that's something you're looking for, brighter, vibrant reds, more like blood red, if you will. The shade up here called Angels is like a holochrome. Beautiful. And we've got more in the mattes, gray tones like the Chucky palette. So yeah, this is beautiful if you like really stunning shimmers. And I do really love how they usually put an iridescent duochrome in their palettes because it just adds a little interest. I love putting one of those in my inner corner. Love this palette, especially if you like very sparkly shimmers. The last palette I'm gonna talk about is the Lunar Beauty Siren Sunset palette. Lunar Beauty has one of my favorite eyeshadow formulas. The Full Fantasy palette between Lunar Beauty and Laura Lee Los Angeles was my #1 palette of last year because I just enjoy the formula and I really enjoy the packaging. I think Manny does a great job making very luxurious packaging for a good price point. So we've got this like siren mermaid. She's calling, she's trying to draw you in, and this beautiful night sky with raised details, really gorgeous. And this is definitely a cool toned color story. The top row, we have those typical cool tone neutrals where they're like cool tone browns, some grays, some taupes. And then we have some different like bluish purple in there as well. I love the looks I got out of this. I love that Lunar Beauty really only usually puts 1 or 2 special shades in their shimmer formula because I'm typically going to reach for a standard shimmer and then occasionally I'll want a special shimmer. But we have an iridescent shade called Water Nymph. Really beautiful, again, for the inner corner. Temptress is like this duochrome, deep, dark, like blue purple. Oh, so pretty. Yeah, I mean, beautiful. They're really smooth shimmers. They're not ultra sparkly like the Crow, but good, easy to work with formulas. Again, kind of like I was talking about Sigma, where it's like a good staple formula. It's not hard to work with. This is a creative color story where you can create a neutral look, but also a couple of different colorful looks. I would say that this leans a little bit more mid-tone to deep. There are a couple of lighter tones, but definitely mid-tone to deep, but love it. I love Lunar Beauty. All right, and that is it for this cool tone palette video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know down below in the comments what are some of your favorite cool tone palettes. I know a lot of you out there are cool toned lovers, and I would just love to know what some of your favorites are, either in your collection or what about the palettes I talked about? Are there any that you really enjoy? Either you've used them or you just have seen them for the first time and they're catching your eye. Let me know your thoughts because I love hearing from you. And if you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up. That helps me out a lot when you do that. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, I would love it if you would consider subscribing before you leave. I do upload videos weekly and I'd love to see you back on my channel again. I want to thank you so much for watching and I will see you next time. Bye.